We are back with another and very special episode of the Do As I Say, Not As I Did podcast. The name, again, kind of explains everything. We're going to teach you how to run your business from our mistakes. So don't do as we did the first time, do as we're saying now. Each week I bring on different experts in their fields to help understand how to really grow a business effectively. And today I have an absolute expert, which I'm so excited to introduce. So each week I bring those people on and we go through real life problems. People are sending problems into the show. We talk through them, we workshop them, and we see what is going on in the real world and how can we help you grow your business right. So if you do have questions, if you have challenges that you're going through in your own business, send an email through to podcast@joelditrapani.com and we'll bring it up on our next show. I'm your host, Joel Ditrapani, and I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Vigo, which is an edtech scale-up. I've been growing it through Australia and the UK, and now I've moved to the US because here's our new focus. We want to grow into this massive market. On top of that, I'm also an advisor and a coach in the product space where I help startups and businesses work out how to build great product teams, because that's how you build great products, and I absolutely got that wrong the first time. And today, I'm so excited to be joined by one of my all-time favorite authors, Liz Wiseman. I'm genuinely still shocked that she came on the show, but she is here. Liz is an incredibly smart and thoughtful leader who has a special gift for communication and storytelling, which is the best possible combination for an author. Liz Wiseman is a researcher and executive advisor who teaches leadership to the top organizations worldwide. She wrote the New York Times bestsellers, Multipliers, The Multiplier Effect, and Wall Street Journal bestsellers, Rookie Smarts and Impact Players. That's multiple bestsellers on multiple lists. She is the CEO of Wiseman Group, a leadership research development firm headquartered in Silicon Valley. Some of her recent clients include Apple, AT&T, Disney, Meta, Google, Microsoft, Salesforce, Tesla, and X. Liz has received the Top Achievement Award for Leadership from Thinkers 50, and she's also been consistently named one of the world's leading 50 management thinkers in its biannual ranking. Now that is a long list of accolades, but I personally discovered Liz and her work when I read Multipliers, a book that had a profound impact on me and my business. It is the single best book in the world about leadership and management, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. Through her experience and her research, Liz makes it clear just what makes an exceptional manager, and then she gives clear and actionable advice on how you can learn those traits. In my own life and in my own business management, I create a plan every single week about what's coming up next week. And every single week for the last 18 months, I've copy and pasted my own summary of the book into that plan, because managing people is the most important thing I can do. And Liz's approach is the only approach that matters. So I'm super excited to have you on the show. Liz is an expert at leadership and team building. So let's jump into it. Welcome, Liz. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Well, Joel, I'm so excited to be here, and I feel like I'm tearing up during your intro comments. I mean, I think it's what we all desperately want in our work is to know it has impact, and so I'm just so delighted. I'm just so delighted, and I have to say the research and the ideas have really changed me as a leader as well. I do a lot of things very differently because of the research I've done.
I'm constantly in pursuit of being this, this idea of a multiplier. I'm not quite there. I'm constantly working towards it, but I'm excited to learn more directly from you about it today and how it's impacted your life. But before we jump into the audience's questions today, I'd love it if you could explain multipliers in a little bit better language than I just did. So what is a multiplier?
Well, a multiplier is someone around whom that we're at our best, our smartest, our most capable. And it's a leader who uses his or her intelligence. By that I mean their know-how, their insight, their, maybe it's their tech skills, their business savvy. It's a leader who uses his or her intelligence in a way that provokes intelligence in others. There are people who multiply the intelligence of others. And it really came out of this idea that, there's a lot of really smart leaders who are really, really smart themselves, but the people around them aren't smart. And I don't mean they were born somehow lacking intelligence and capability. It's that they're bringing all of that intelligence to their work, but it's not getting used. And it's because of how the leader is using his or her own intelligence. So, the multiplier is in sharp contrast to the leader I call a diminisher, who's smart and capable, but they have this diminishing, dampening effect on the intelligence of others. Like they're the kind of leaders we tend to hold back around. We play it safe. When they walk in a room, people kind of shut up and shut down. And in some ways they are making room for that leader to be the smartest person in the room. Or sometimes they just don't need to step up because that leader is maybe so big. And so I looked at these two different kind of leaders, these diminishing leaders versus these multiplier leaders.
That is a much better description than I tried to do up top. There's so much good information.
I thought yours was great.
Well, look, there's so much good information about this, and like I absolutely recommend reading that book and reading all of Liz's books. But like my personal preference is Multipliers. Just start there, and you're going to love the entire series. But look, Liz, let's jump into the questions, and I'm sure we're going to get more and more of this content as we go through. So, this first question today is called, "Am I a bad leader?" I'm the CEO and co-founder of my startup, and my advisor mentioned that a great leader and CEO can motivate his team to go above and beyond. You often see it in movies where a great leader, often in a military role, gives a speech that invigorates his soldiers to fight bravely. Obviously that's Hollywood, but I'm sure we've all had that leader who can pump us up. My mentor also warns me of keeping deadweight founders on startup teams who do the bare minimum. And recently, my co-founder has no motivation, and I've tried everything I can think of to motivate them through every mean possible. But COVID-19 has made him very lazy. He even admitted to me that he's very lazy at home. Just zero motivation. Am I just a bad leader, or is he just a bad fit for the team, or is it a combination of both? And this one's from Counterpart. I don't know if that's a clear answer here.
Oh, I think this is a really, really interesting dynamic, and it brings together so many parts of my research looking at what is it that leaders do that cause people to be deeply motivated and contributing at their very fullest. But also, what is it that the contributors do? It's the premise of this book, Impact Players, which are what are the people doing who are having the biggest impact? Well, I think it's okay. So let's unpack motivation. See, I think a lot of, I think to really understand the leader's role, you have to understand what is motivation and what motivates people. Daniel Pink, one of my favorite authors, wrote a book called Drive, and I really recommend it. And he talks about like what tends to like be false motivations, kind of like false carrots versus what creates real motivation. And one of those things is having autonomy over our work. And we find that people do their best work when they are in control of their work. Like we're motivated when we hold like majority vote over something. We find that people also, or as Dan writes, that people are motivated by mastery, by being able to get better and better at something. And then people are also motivated when there's some sort of connection to purpose or impact. Now tends to be what is like lasting kind of motivation, as opposed to the ephemeral motivation of, here's a reward, here's recognition, or even building a great company. In some ways, it's ephemeral kinds of motivations. I think a lot of leaders, falsely believe that it's their job to motivate people. That, like, I'm here to pump you up, to kind of paraphrase a Saturday Night skit from, I think, maybe the 1980s or something. And it's like, I'm going to get you kind of excited. I'm going to get the organization all jacked up, and I'm going to bring the energy. And it's this pep rally model of leadership, but it actually is extraordinarily demotivating. Now, it may create this temporary motivation, kind of like a sugar high. And you think of like corporate sort of rallies, kickoffs, it's often this kind of motivation. But it doesn't tend to last. And in many ways, the more energy that the leader brings, the less energy other people bring. Because if that person is like bringing it all, you don't need to. And, this reminds me of one of my very favorite multiplier stories. And it was something that the legendary basketball player Magic Johnson had shared with me. He talked about, he was phenomenally talented as an athlete at a very young age. And his coach said something to him that really shaped him as a leader. His coach said, Irvin, because he's young, Irvin Johnson Jr. at that point, it's not Magic. Irvin, every time you get the ball, I want you to take the shot. And so he does, and he scores a lot of points. He's like bringing talent. He's bringing energy. He's playing big. The coach loves it because he's not only talented, he's coachable. The other players love it because they're on a winning streak. They're undefeated. But, he's scoring most of those baskets. They would win with 54 points, and young Irvin Johnson Jr., he would have scored, 48, 50, sometimes 52 of those points. And he's watching this play out over and over, but everybody is celebrating it. And then, they're playing a game as a team. The game comes to an end. They've won. The celebration has come to an end. And Irvin, this young boy, I have to imagine he's a high school kid, which is why I think I find this so inspiring. He notices the faces of the parents who came there to watch their kids play. And, so what he saw in their faces was probably something between disappointment or, maybe resentment, maybe anger. And it gets to him. He described it as sort of getting inside of him. And he as a high school kid made a decision that he would use his God-given talent to help everyone be a better player. Here's why I share this with regard to motivation is he's bringing this energy. He's playing big. And it's not like he's suppressing other people. It's not like he's elbowing out his team. It's that the other members of the team, they don't need to play big because they've got this big player. And I think it's the case with leaders who bring the energy, who are motivating people. Like they're bringing so much, energy, charisma, drive, motivation that the people around them don't need to bring it. And so we can end up getting really lazy around people who are really driven.
I guess I'd like to understand. So it's not your job as a leader to motivate ephemerally. I've never said that word before, but it sounded amazing after I heard you say it. I guess in my mind, it is still their job to motivate them, but with the right motivators, to create an environment where they are motivated. So to give them the work that challenges them, that makes them feel valued, that makes them, I guess, give them the opportunity to grow into what they know they can be, which in my mind is still motivating them.
Exactly. But I like your choice of words on this, Joel, because what you said is your job is to give them an environment that motivates them. And so I shared this is that I think a lot of leaders think I'm supposed to motivate people, and it takes them down this path of this exhausting form of motivation that actually ends up demotivating people. People tend to shrink, hold back, get lazy around leaders who are doing the big all caps motivation. But if we think in terms of it is, our job as a leader is to create an environment where people are motivated and to give them work that they can be motivated by. So to create an environment where people are motivated, on a very practical level, one of my favorite little multiplier practices is this idea of giving someone 51% of the vote. Collaboration is very much in vogue, but what collaboration does is it erodes accountability. And I think people are at their best when they feel people are depending on me. I own this. I've got to show up and I've got to deliver when we give people autonomy. So I would think maybe this person needs more autonomy, more this is your part of the business. And we're looking to you to drive that forward. You own it. You get 51% of the vote when it comes to these kinds of things. Mastery. How do you give people something that they can get better and better at that principle of leveling up and something with purpose. One of the other multiplier practices is this idea of identifying people's, what I call their native genius. And it might be, we tend to be most motivated when we're doing work that evokes one of our like killer strengths, something that we're better at than anyone else, better at the other things we do. And when people can take something they're really good at and apply it to something that is hard and meaningful, like that creates this natural motivation. So it's like creating an environment where people can have responsibility and are trusted and empowered, but then it's giving people work that's just a little out of reach.
Yeah.
It might be that this individual's kind of phoning it in because they're stuck going through the motions. Maybe it needs to be just a challenge just out of reach and something that they can own entirely. And that might kind of kick in their natural motivation.
So I feel like we have some pretty good, I guess, tactical advice here, which is first thing counterpart is that it is your job it's not necessarily your job to come in and create this external motivation for people, but it very much as a leader and a CEO and a co-founder, it is your job to create the right environment for people to be motivated. And that is like a very specific set of actions, and if you read Multipliers, it lays them all out very clearly. But just as a couple of dot points there, one is give them 51% of the vote. And then the next is to give them tasks that they are, it's in their zone of genius, that they're native genius, and that's a little bit beyond them, so they're growing into it. But if you have done that and you have created that environment and your co-founder is just still being lazy, then that's a different problem, Then that isn't you at fault here. That is your co-founder at fault. And then you are going to need to, cut them, change them, put them in a different part of the company. Like, I don't know what the role is there, but you can't keep them in that role if they're going to continue being lazy, because that will, in my opinion, seep out to the rest of the organization, which is very bad.
It does seep out to the organization. It's, one of the things that we found is that, that these multipliers aren't just these like empowering, trusting, feel-good kind of leaders. They're tough, they're demanding, and it's one of the reasons why we're at our best around them is they not only create this environment, they create this stretch, and they hold people accountable. And, holding this person accountable for carrying their weight on the team is really important, because if you don't hold that person accountable, then accountability starts to erode throughout the organization. And, Joel, I will never forget this one executive coaching assignment I had. And, this executive was the head of an IT, organization. He was a really nice guy, super, super smart. And when I interviewed, half a dozen people who reported to him, they almost all said some version of this, which is, I wish he held us accountable. See, because what happens when you don't hold someone accountable, what you're saying is, and again, this kind of comes back to this motivation issue. Let's say, Joel, you and I are partnered together and you are kind of like pushing and I've kind of lost motivation for whatever reason. And you let that slide. What you're essentially saying to me is, you know what, Liz, your part of this deal doesn't matter that much. Like your work doesn't matter. Your contribution doesn't matter. Or I don't think you're capable of doing more. And then, of course, it cascades and sends a message to the organization, which is like, yeah, we can get by if not everyone's contributing at their fullest. Like some people's work is secondary, it's discretionary. When we hold people accountable, for their work, for their best thinking, for like taking up a seat on the team, for wearing the jersey, then what we're saying is like, I need what you're doing. Your work matters. I believe you can do this. I know you're capable of more. And it says it without having to give someone some faux motivational speech.
Yeah. It makes people feel valued. When you're holding them accountable and they're delivering that work, that they're providing value, and then you're appreciating that. Whereas, I guess that challenge is, I think it's particularly tough with co-founders. Co-founders go into a business that they've got a relationship for a long time, and as the business changes, it feels like, that this co-founder's always been here. We can't do anything to them. And as they get lazier, it can be a challenge. But I guess it gets so easy to fall into that rut where you think like, well, they've provided so much value in the past. Just because they're not now, give them a break. But the more you give them a break, the lower their motivation gets, which, means you need to give more of a break, which becomes negative, sets bad, I guess, standards for the rest of the company.
Well, there's something else I've learned from multipliers that might be useful here is when people start to underdeliver in any capacity. My guess is everyone listening has had an experience where people have underdelivered to your expectation. It is so natural and easy for us to start to focus on like what we're not getting. Like they're not as motivated me. They're not as this as I need them to be. And one of the things we found is that the multiplier leader tends to have a very external orientation, not external as in customer facing, but other oriented way of thinking. And so when people are disappointing us, it's very easy to get inside our head. I'm not getting what I need. I'm not getting what I want. I'm frustrated. And it might help to just look at this person and figure out what is it that they need right now. Like maybe what they need is they need a path out. Maybe what they need is a new challenge, a new role. And it's not like, gee, how do I cater to their needs, but how do I get inside of their head and figure out like, what does a win look like for them in this scenario?
Yeah.
And I think if you take that, found that other person's perspective and figure out how could I help them get to a place where they are motivated, they're winning, they're being successful, like that might be the least frustrating and fastest path to getting back to a partnership that works or to moving on from that partnership.
Yeah. And accountability is the key through both of those. Whether they start delivering or not, starting to hold them accountable is your best possible chance of getting them remotivated. So we'll bring that one to a close there. Our final judgment is your job is not to be an external motivator, but it is to create the right environment. And there's a lot of tactics you can do that, but hold accountable, create, I guess, stretch for them and put them in a space where they can deliver work that they're good at. And if that doesn't work, move them along. Maybe it's somewhere else in the company or maybe it's out of the company. But that's your advice, counterpart. And we're going to close you out there. So Liz, we still haven't worked this out. We're trying to come up with like a tagline at the end of a question to call it finish. We've had pitches from all of our guests. So I'd love a pitch from you in this episode at some point. We've had amen. We've had you've been advised. That's the most common one. We've had do as I say. But do you have any suggestions for how we close out counterparts section here?
Oh, maybe it's, back to you, on you. I don't know.
Yeah, back to you, counterpart. Thought. That's good. I like it. Back to you, counterpart. All right, we'll jump into question 2. Question 2 is called, Is My Boss Crazy? I've been working in a startup since 2020.
Let's just go to the answer. Yes, probably.
Yeah, I've read this. It sounds tough. So I've been working in a startup since 2020. I first joined as a scientist after my PhD, and I've worked my way up to operations manager. I currently supervise a team of 10 people. I'm one of 2 middle managers in a company with 5 C-levels. My current team has 11 people, and the other middle manager, Mike, supervises 7. Our current work process still needs a lot of development, so I've been carrying multiple hats in the meantime. Mike has quit, and he's going to be leaving soon, but the C-level wants me to take over the team of Mike, which would result in me having 18 direct reports in the current structure. With no money to replace Mike, I'm feeling burnt out and just the thought of it gives me panic attacks. C-level thinks that if I drop a couple of meetings, it'll all be fine. It does not really work like that. I really don't want to take over the rest of the people. Does anyone have an idea of how to say no? Is my boss crazy? Will I get fired? What rights do I have? I believe some of the C-level should take over the other team members as they have way more time on their agenda. What are your thoughts? From Direct Ad 8056.
Ooh, I really like this one.
There's a lot going on here, but it's actually kind of seems. I guess for me, this boils down to one question I'd love to ask you, because I don't know if it actually gets covered in a book. How many direct reports should you have?
I don't know the answer to that. But I have two thoughts that come to mind, for this person, which is, first of all, as a leader, this is a huge opportunity as a leader. And it's not to amass a bigger kingdom. It's to go through a step level change, because, 18 direct reports is too much for you to continue leading the way that you have been leading. So it's kind of like I missed the specifics on the number, but let's call it a 2x increase in the amount of people. Yeah. And so if you are in a time sharing model of leadership where you're like, okay, you know what, let me help Sunir, and then let me go over here and, talk to Sarah, and then let me go over here and do this, you're going to run yourself ragged. You're going to do bad work as a scientist, as an operations leader, as a manager. And so you're going to fail. Like, absolutely. If you handle it with the same approach and in this time sharing mode, you will fail at this. And so you're wise to be thinking, okay, this doesn't sound good. My boss seems crazy. If you want to, kind of continue down a technical or scientific path, then maybe this isn't for you. But if you like being a manager and you value being a manager and you want to build your managerial skill set, this is an amazing opportunity, because you can't do it with linear thinking. You have to figure out, okay, how does my role fundamentally change? Who do I need to empower to go do that? It reminds me of these experiences that I had. I'm a mother of 4 children, and, all 4 of my children were born when I was working at Oracle in this technical organization. It's a really big job. And so I had to prepare myself to go out for a maternity leave. And so I just thought about my role differently, and I started giving people bigger chunks of the work and taking work that I had been doing and delegating it to capable people. And, I went out on these leaves, like, I don't know, for me, this was like maybe 2 months, which might seem barbaric to certain people, like who maybe took longer periods of time. But then I came back, and I remember coming back and trying to decide, okay, do I just pick up my old responsibilities again? Thank people for having babysat that work while I was, off with the baby. Or do I continue to let that person sort of like take a bite out of my job, which allowed me to step up into bigger roles and have bigger impact, which is a little uncomfortable at first. But I think this is an incredible opportunity to think about empowering people, giving people like a bite out of that old role of yours, and formulating kind of a bigger, more strategic, more impactful role as a leader. So that's one line of thinking I go down. I don't presume to know whether or not this person really kind of wants to grow as the leader, or if their growth maybe comes more as a scientist. Okay, so let me assume that maybe it doesn't. Maybe they don't want to kind of build that next. And I should probably back up and say, one of the things I've noticed is that, growth as a leader is not linear. Like, we learn a little bit, and then we kind of get into these new roles, and then you have to completely rethink the way you're leading. Like, when you go from managing a team where you know everyone to now you're managing managers, and then you're managing people you don't even know. And so you have to think in terms of systems and environment and culture. Like, they're non-linear changes we have to make. But let me assume that there's maybe not growth as a leader isn't the top concern. Then it's like, I just want to be successful. I'm doing my work, and I fear this is going to compromise my success. Then we get into kind of the art of how do you say no without it being relationship damaging, career ending, without being kind of like, oh yeah, that's the guy who we asked to do something and he turned us down, which does put tension in relationships. I know as a leader, like the people who've said like, yeah, I know you didn't need me to do this thing, but I don't think I want to do it. I think twice before going back and asking them to do something big and hard and important. So how do you do that? This is something I learned from a former boss of mine who was the head of HR for Oracle. His name is Phil Wilson. He had served as the head of HR for for 2 companies. One was working for Steve Jobs at Next Computer, and the other was working for Larry Ellison at Oracle.
Wow.
So he had 2 very, very demanding bosses. And he told me, kind of how he handled that, because both of them would ask him to do things that were absolutely outrageous. Like, he had crazy bosses. And Phil told me how he handled the request from the mercurial, crazy, visionary, bold kind of boss is he always said yes. And so let's say, your boss comes to you as the head of HR and says, you know what, I think this product sucks. You know what, let's just fire the 300 people working on this product. I hate their product. It's full of bugs. I want to fire them. So when Phil would get a request like that, I'm not saying he got requests like that, but if it were something like that, where you're like, that is such a harebrained thing, he would always come back and say, absolutely, we can do that. We can, dismiss this whole team. But if we do that, here's the amount of time we're probably going to spend in litigation and in deposition and in court dealing with wrongful termination. But absolutely, we can do that. And here are the consequences of it. Like, this is such a simple formula for what we do when we get harebrained kinds of requests or things that just are going to break us. It's, I'd love to lead that initiative. I'm happy to do that. And here's what I won't be able to do if I do that. And here are some of the things I'm concerned about. And when we give people that affirmative yes, and then educate them on the consequences by starting with a yes, and we kind of keep them in learning mode, because when we start with like, that's a bad idea, I'm not sure, like, we put them in this defensive mode of, okay, wait a minute, now I've got to convince them that they should do this. So it's yes, and let's talk about the consequences. And I remember when Phil explained this to me, and my own experience with this is people almost always come to the rational decision. It's rare that someone says, yeah, I see all those consequences, let's do it anyway. Unless your boss is truly crazy, and then you might not want to work there.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. Like, you should pick your bosses, and people say no one quits a job, they quit their boss. And I think that's true, So if your boss is actually insane, reconsider that. But I love this approach, Liz, of thinking about this from two angles, which is, one, learn how to communicate with your boss if this is going to break you. And if it is going to break you, the advice really clearly is to just read Liz's books, because it actually tells you how to deal with your bosses better as well. Like, you can manage up to some extent. Like, you can expect more and kind of train your manager into being the manager that you need. And it sounds like I actually totally agree with this. This is a huge opportunity. It sounds like you can't do it the way you've been doing it, but there's a big opportunity that we should unpack. But, the way you're talking about your boss and going into panic attacks, like, that's a negative place, and you need to get on better terms with your boss about that. Because if you're having panic attacks at work, like, that's a separate issue to deal with. So read Liz's books, work out how to have those conversations effectively.
So I'll tell you, you mentioned I was an expert at something. There's probably only a couple things I really have expertise in. As one is, I have a lot of expertise in what it's like when we are working for a diminishing leader. You can imagine I'm a magnet for these stories. I know a lot about what happens to people when they have diminishing bosses. And it very quickly puts us in this victim mentality when, we suddenly become like victims of other people's whims as leaders. And I think one of the things we quickly forget is how much power we actually have. How much power we have in terms of managing those expectations, how we not manage up in terms of manipulate, because when someone's manipulating us, we just try to manipulate back. That just perpetuates the problem. But how proactive we can be, how assertive we can be, how much room there is to negotiate that work relationship and that work contract. But it requires us to kind of keep our head a little bit above that situation. And if I could, sort of signal one thing when people are in a situation where their boss is crazy, is they instantly go to, okay, I need a new job. I need to leave. And they take a new job, but they often end up working for the same type of diminishing leaders. And what we really should be doing is not looking for jobs, but really shopping for the right kind of boss, because the way that our bosses operate and the culture that's created around it shapes our ability to contribute. So like when we are looking to make a move, like the first thing we should be doing, well, I guess after you vet the opportunity, that there's like meaningful work and a reasonable market opportunity, et cetera. It's like you want to just double, triple kind of click on sort of what's the MO for the person who will be your boss.
Yeah. That is great advice. Shop for bosses. So look, if we start to bring this one to a close as well, I think we've given some. When I say we, I'm taking some credit for all of Liz's work right now. I think there's some great advice here for direct ad, but I think startups and growing businesses, they don't always have great leaders, but you have been given this really interesting opportunity, and this opportunity is that. The ability to lead a team of 18. That doesn't mean you need to directly manage them all. And what that means is that whatever you're doing before, you have to double it. And that is not tenable. That is not possible. Don't try and do that. But just think, you've got 18 incredible people that you can manage and lead in any way you want, whether that's manage them all one-on-one, or you make little pods, or change it however you like. So see this as an opportunity that this could be your jump to the C-level. If you win this and you do a great job of this, like there's so much career upside here. But if that's not what you want, there are ways to say no. And there are ways to say no where you can, continue with having a great relationship. And all of that advice has been mentioned somewhat in this question, but is very much in Liz's books as well. So I'm going to call that our final judgment. Work out what you want first of all. I say this on every episode, but get a mentor as well. Just get a mentor. Mentors are the best to help you through this. And you've been advised. Back to you, direct ad. So we are coming to the end of our time here, but there were so many amazing questions that I wanted to get Liz to run through. So we're going to speed run one. We're going to try and do it in a couple of minutes before we call this quits. The question that I'm really excited to run through is called Scaling a Team with No Experience. I'm a founder and I'm trying to scale a sales team, and I realized something yesterday. I haven't done a good enough job of surrounding myself with people who've successfully done this before. This was brought up during a VC due diligence call. I can personally sell, which is something I've only just recently learned over the past 12 months. But admittedly, I don't know much about managing a sales operation at scale, and we're looking currently to bring on our first couple of reps. Realistically, there are a lot of tactics and best practices that are simply just not on my radar. Even advice as to what questions I should be asking, I have no idea. So how do you scale a team when you don't have experience in that space at all? And this is from Agora app. And I thought this is a great question because I've gone through stuff like this myself. I had to start scaling a product team and I'd never done any product, and I had to hire engineers and I'd never been an engineer. How do you start to do that as a leader when you don't have those very specific, expertise of the team that you're leading?
Okay, I love this question because asking the question is half the way to success in this scenario. So I want to share a couple insights. So I wrote this book called Rookie Smarts, and the premise of this book is that actually when we're new to something, we're not like disastrous noobs bumbling our way. Actually, in many, many circumstances, we're at our very best when we know the very least. Sure, we don't bring expertise. We don't know how to scale sales practices. And there is absolutely a science and an art to how an organization needs to scale sales as it reaches different thresholds. But it's not that we bring content knowledge. When we are clear that we are a rookie in this situation, we are at the bottom of the learning curve, it tends to prompt certain kinds of behaviors. We tend to be curious. We ask questions. Like, we don't bring expertise. But what I found in my research is that people who are new to something important and hard, they tend to bring 5 times the amount of expertise in because they don't know. They go around asking other people. I was asked to go build Oracle University when I was 24 years old. And I'm like, wait a minute, this seems like an adult job. Do we lack adult supervision? And I remember thinking, I know nothing about how to build a university. I was just at a university just a couple years ago. And I remember that panicky feeling of, I don't know how to do this, but let me go find people who do know how to do it. And so it put me on this hunt for expertise. And I went around to a lot of different corporate universities. How did you do it? What does it look like? I went to universities and I started asking people and bringing all of this in. So actually being at the bottom of a learning curve and being aware of it and dealing with something important hard tends to prompt all the right kinds of things that will bring that expertise in. So first of all, like, know that this might actually be your finest moment, not your lowest point. Number two is, if you are leading a team and you don't have a lot of expertise, what it means is it actually is going to prime you not to take the diminisher path of telling everyone what to do, barking orders. It's actually going to put you in that multiplier mode of, let me ask good questions. Let me find what people are good at. Let me deploy them on things that utilize those gifts. Let me give other people responsibility because I can't do it myself. So you're primed for brilliance. You're primed for multiplier leadership. But you have to make sure you don't bumble this. You have to continue to remind yourself that your value as a leader does not come from your expertise, and it does not come from having the answers. It comes from asking good questions. And so the determinant of your success will be, how good are your questions and how good are the experts that you end up reaching out to and learning from.
I love that advice. My whole ed tech business is around connecting you with the people you need. The whole idea behind this podcast is about connecting, the startup ecosystem with smart people and experts like you, Liz. So I love that idea that, if you understand where you're at and you know that you're at the beginning, just bring the right people in. Because at the end of the day, you don't need to be a very highly technical engineer to build a great company, but you just need to make sure that you bring the right people into your team all the time. And I guess that's the premise I love through all of your books. It's just about making the most and getting the most out of people. And there's no point in Multipliers at all where it says, become an expert in that field, because you don't need to be. That's why you hire the expert, and that's why you have mentors and coaches and advisors. Build that community.
Like, get access to all the brains that you can borrow. And I think the other thing that's really important is, when you're new to something, you're going to get it wrong. And that's part of why we tend to be at our best, is because we know we're going to get it wrong. So we're on the lookout for mistakes. We tend to admit those quickly. We make adjustments, and then we're constantly pivoting. And so, be humble enough as a leader to say, okay, I need to figure out where we're making mistakes fast, diagnose that, learn from it, pivot, admit it, and move forward. But if you just go with this dogged determination of, like, I have to get it right because I'm new and people are looking at me, you will get it wrong.
Yeah.
It's all about how we're agile and humble and curious when we're new to something really hard.
And so you will look back. You will look back and it will have been so fun. It will be hard, but you've now built this team and you've learned so much, and like those moments have always been the most fun and the most rewarding when I look back on my own journey of building a business, is when you take those new steps, and it's I know, I love it. That's what I do with that adrenaline.
Well, and Joel, to kind of get us back full circle, like, that's motivating, that's thrilling.
Yeah.
That doesn't lead to burnout. People think we burn out because we have too much work. No, we burn out because we have a lack of impact, or because we're not learning, because we're going through the motions. Like, it'll put the whole team in this, like, you'll be primed for motivation. And maybe going back to that first question, maybe that co-founder's been at it too long, and maybe they need kind of a new learning curve to go scale.
Yeah. Well, look, we'll wrap that one up for Agora app. There's so much more we can give, but that's why you go to Liz's books. There's a whole book based on this. So we'll close that one out. We're going to come to the last section of the show, which is just plugs. Everyone's favorite part of the show. And I feel like you know what's going to come up in this section, because I've already mentioned Liz's books 1,000 times. But Liz, what have you got going on? What would you like to plug? What would you like to shout out?
Oh, I don't know that I want to plug anything. Maybe I'll plug some other people's work. Amy Edmondson is the Harvard Business School professor, is a friend and a colleague. She kind of wrote the seminal book on psychological safety. It's one of the foundational and fundamental conditions needed for people to do their best thinking and their best work. She's got a new book coming out, and it's called The Right Kind of Failure. And I think my copy is in the mail, and I don't know when exactly it releases, but it's a book I'm really looking forward to. Like, how do you not just flail and fail, but how as a leader do you create the right kind of failure?
I love it.
So go check that out.
What a kind plug. Well, I'm going to plug Liz's stuff. So get all of Liz's books. They're all good. Particularly start with Multipliers because that's my personal favorite. And then follow Liz on all of the social medias, which I'll also put links in as well. And if you want, coaching, check out the Wiseman Group because Liz's company also does that too. Just so it's super clear, this is not a sponsored episode. I just personally love all of this stuff from Liz, so I would recommend. And then on my side, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Do it on your phone, and I say it every episode, and I will for every episode. Go to your friend's phone, your parents' phone, your family's phone, hit like and subscribe on their phones as well. Thank you to everyone who wrote in. We love your problems. We love your questions. If you have questions that you want us to answer, write them in, and we'll cover them with some really cool people too. Send them through to podcast@joelditrapani.com. And lastly, I love talking about this kind of stuff. Love having these conversations. I love product and product challenges. So if you have anything about building a business, book some time with me and let's have a conversation. I've got a booking link in the show notes too. Let's have a conversation. So we're going to wrap this one up. Liz, thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you so much for the advice and sharing those stories. I still can't believe that Magic Johnson had that self-awareness as a kid. There's no way in hell I would have had that, but it's been amazing having you on the show. And to the audience, this has been another episode of the Do As I Say podcast. We'll see you all next week.